So let's talk about why your homeschooler might be behind their public school peers and why that's not a problem. I am stuck in the car waiting for my daughter, so let's get into it. So to understand this, we have to understand a few things. So homeschoolers generally homeschool for the mastery model, meaning that we expect our students to completely understand a concept before we move on to the next concept. Schools do not follow a mastery model. They can't. For example, take a class of kindergartners. So they learn for the year, they all learn together. And despite their teacher's best efforts, about, let's say, 10% of the class doesn't understand all of the concepts that were taught and covered that year. Now, regardless of whether they understood those concepts or not, they are pushed through into first grade. So they now have some small holes in their education. Well, now they're in first grade, and because they have some small holes, and because there's just no way that a teacher could catch them all up, they are now pushed into second grade, whether they understood the kindergarten and first grade concepts. Only now there's more of them. Maybe in first grade, another 5% of kids really didn't understand the concepts, but now they're pushed into second grade. So now they're in second grade, and the teachers are required to teach to the second grade standard. They have a curriculum they're supposed to cover. They have a list of things that they are supposed to teach, and they do not have the time or the capability to fill all these holes. Say another 5% of students didn't understand all the second grade concepts. So now you have about 20% of those students moving into third grade with holes in their education. So now they're in third grade. The third grade teacher is required to teach specific third grade skills and concepts. They are not allowed to deviate, and even if they do have some time and they are allowed some deviation, how are they going to fill all of those gaps? They have to identify them. They have to fill them with each individual child. It's not possible. So now more kids enter the pool. And now we have an even larger pool of kids who don't really understand all of the concepts before moving on, but they're being pushed into fourth grade, and on and on and on as they go up through the grades. I was just watching a video last night, and I reposted it, of a seventh grade, it looked like English teacher, who was saying that only 40% of her students could read at grade level. And the ones who weren't reading at seventh grade level weren't reading at like sixth grade level. They were reading at like second grade level. So this is the survey method. Teachers are required to teach at their grade level, regardless of what the students know and understand, regardless of what holes they may have in their education. These teachers are required to present this information. So lots of information is being presented to these kids, but a lot of these kids are not understanding it. They're not mastering it. They go into the next grade and the next grade and the next. Now, say at some point your child is one of those children with holes in their education. They're not doing well in school. They're developing what's called learned helplessness, meaning these kids are passed from grade to grade to grade, and they think one of two thoughts about themselves. Either they think, I am stupid, or they think education is stupid. They've learned this because they just can't keep up with their peers, and they don't understand the material that has been presented to them. So now you pull your kid out and you start filling holes. What does that look like? Well, it might mean that you have a fifth grader who is doing fifth grade math, or maybe they've already mastered fifth grade math and they're ready for sixth grade math, but maybe they have a second grade reading level. Now your friends and family might be like, oh, look how far behind they are in reading. That's so scary. They're behind their public school peers, but they're not. They're behind the public school peers who manage to do well and don't have giant holes in their education. They are not behind their public school peers who were struggling, and like this teacher said, the 60% of her class that wasn't reading at grade level. But once again, we have homeschoolers compared to this high, ridiculous ideal, the best of the best, the kids who were doing the best in school, instead of being compared to the average kid in school who has massive holes in their education and negative beliefs about learning. And even if you've been homeschooling from the beginning, you might be moving through the material slower because you are taking your time, you're following the mastery method, you're making sure that that foundation is solid, that there are no gaps, and that your child is being met where they're at developmentally so that they move forward with positive thoughts and beliefs about education and self-efficacy, understanding that they can learn and that learning is fun and enjoyable. But since you're not racing through a curriculum, pushing, moving them forward, even if they haven't learned the concepts or aren't developmentally ready, you're behind. Well, what will inevitably happen if you go through and you meet your child where they're at, if you identify where the gaps are, if you fill them in, if you help them get a positive attitude about learning, if you help develop their self-efficacy, what is bound to happen is eventually your homeschooler's knowledge and level will skyrocket. But for a while, it will appear like your homeschooler is behind. That's why I say there is no such thing as a child behind in their education.